The moment it begins, it doesn't come with an announcement. There's no grand revelation, no fireworks in the sky to let you know your life is about to collapse and reshape itself from the inside out. It starts with silence, a silence that feels foreign, almost violent. The things that once comforted you begin to feel hollow. The world you trusted begins to feel like an illusion. It's not madness, although it feels like it. It's not depression, although the void can swallow you whole. It is the slow, seismic shifting of identity. The ego starts to tremble under the weight of a question it cannot answer. Who am I, if not this? And the moment that question burns its way into your soul, your awakening has already begun. Spiritual awakening is not light pouring into your life like a sunrise. It is fire, it is destruction, it is the peeling away of every mask you didn't know you were wearing. And you must survive the burn before you can ever feel reborn. Carl Jung said enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So when your life begins to fall apart, when your relationships crack and your dreams decay, you are not breaking, you are beginning. But the beginning tastes like death. Death of certainty, death of roles, death of who you were trained to be. This is not poetic metaphor, this is psychic surgery. Your spiritual awakening is the death of the persona, the mask you wore, to fit in, to be good, to be loved. And the healing begins only when you dare to look underneath. Because underneath the mask lives the shadow. And the shadow is not your enemy. It is your unclaimed power, your rejected emotion, your silenced truth. It is everything you buried to be acceptable in a world that punishes authenticity. It is your grief, your rage, your repressed desires clawing their way back to the surface. And it terrifies you because you were taught to fear your own depth. But the paradox is this: what you fear most within you is also your path to wholeness. You cannot survive your spiritual awakening by running from your shadow. You must invite it in. You must sit with the uncomfortable truths it whispers. You must allow the anger to teach you where you were voiceless. Let the sadness show you where you were abandoned. Let the fear become your compass toward self-protection and inner boundaries. The shadow does not destroy you. The resistance to it does. Jung understood this. He called the process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. And wholeness is not perfection. It is integration. To survive this path, you must abandon the illusion of being only light. You must become honest, raw, undone. And in that undoing, you do not become less. You become real. The healing happens not because you find peace, but because you stop pretending you already had it. Because peace cannot be built on lies. And most of what we call our identity is a web of lies we inherited, false beliefs, survival patterns, cultural masks. Spiritual awakening tears them down and the soul is left naked, confused, grieving. But this grief is sacred. It is the bridge between the false self and the true self. You will be tempted to run. You will crave distraction like oxygen. The modern world has trained you well to escape yourself through screens, noise addictions, perfectionism, codependency. But the soul cannot be tricked forever. It will collapse everything you thought was stable just to bring you back to truth. It will end relationships that were built on your people-pleasing. It will strip away careers you chose to please your family. It will destroy your coping mechanisms, so you have no choice but to feel. And this is where most people break, not because they're weak, but because they were never prepared for the spiritual terrain of awakening. It's not that they fail, it's that no one warned them the light would come disguised as a breakdown. So they medicate the pain, they numb the ache, they retreat into old patterns and call it healing. But healing does not mean the pain ends. It means the pain finally makes sense. To survive your awakening, you must stop trying to fix yourself and start learning to witness yourself. Observe your fears without becoming them. Hold space for your wounds without collapsing into them. Speak the truth you are too afraid to admit, even if your voice trembles. Because every time you choose truth over illusion, your soul exhales. Every time you sit in silence instead of running from it, your nervous system rewires. Every time you honor your intuition over external validation, you reclaim yourself. And this reclamation is not a one-time act. It is a daily devotion to the inner world, a willingness to feel deeply, to ask hard questions, to live without certainty. And it will cost you everything false, but it will give you everything real. The body holds the truth before the mind can accept it. That tightening in your chest, that restlessness in your gut, that exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes, these are not random. They are signals from the unconscious. The soul speaks in symptoms when we ignore its whispers. So when your body collapses, when your emotions rage, when your dreams become strange and symbolic, pay attention. This is not madness. This is message. Jung believed that dreams are the guiding voice of the unconscious. They carry fragments of your lost self coded in symbols, asking to be remembered. The monsters in your dreams are not here to hurt you. They are you. The exiled parts, the forgotten voices. To survive your awakening, you must stop dismissing your inner experiences as irrelevant. Your intuition is not a fantasy. It is your compass. But to follow it, you must be willing to get lost. You must leave the familiar path, question the inherited rules, and surrender the illusion of control. Awakening is not about gaining knowledge. It's about unlearning everything that is not your essence. And in that emptying, you find a strange freedom, a wild silence, a truth that doesn't need to be proven, only lived. But make no mistake, this path is lonely. Not because you are alone, but because few will understand. And yet you are not meant to be understood by everyone. You are meant to remember who you are, even if no one else sees it. Because your healing is not a performance. It is a rebellion, a sacred uprising of soul over system. And eventually, something shifts. Not dramatically, not loudly. But you begin to feel yourself again, not the version you created to be loved, but the essence underneath. You feel more rooted in your body, more honest in your no, more aligned in your yes. The chaos hasn't disappeared, but your relationship to it has. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and begin asking, what is this teaching me? You stop blaming the world for your suffering and begin listening to the wound as a doorway. The same pain that once shattered you now becomes your medicine. The darkness you feared now feels familiar, like a cave where you found your own fire. This is the turning point, not because life gets easier, but because you become deeper, more whole, more awake. You no longer need external permission to be who you are. You trust the silence, you honor the shadow, you speak truth without apology. And this is how you survive, not by returning to who you were, but by becoming who you've always been beneath the noise. Carl Jung knew that individuation was not a destination, but a lifelong unfolding. And now you're living it. You've stopped waiting for the world to validate your becoming. You are the validation, you are the awakening, you are the one you were waiting for. And now you walk not above others, not below them, but beside them in truth. Whole, free, and real. You no longer worship the image of who you were. You bury it. And from that burial rises something sacred, not a perfect version of you, but a true one. One who carries scars without shame. One who walks with grief as a companion, not a curse. One who understands that healing was never meant to erase the pain, but to weave it into wisdom. And now you don't chase peace, you embody it. Because you've stopped bargaining with life to be painless. You've stopped begging the universe to be fair. You've stopped outsourcing your worth to things that can vanish. And in that surrender, you discover something invincible, the quiet, knowing that you can face anything without abandoning yourself again. This is what surviving your spiritual awakening looks like. It's not a glowing halo above your head. It's not a perfect routine or a life that makes sense on paper. It's standing in front of the ruins of who you used to be and choosing to stay. choosing to breathe, choosing to feel everything you once ran from. And with each breath, you become a sanctuary, not for others, for yourself. You become the ground beneath your own feet, the sky above your own storm. You're not seeking light anymore. You're learning to become it, piece by broken piece. And when you shine, it's not to be seen. It's to remind yourself that even in the darkest cave, the soul remembers how to burn. The old version of you, the one who chased love to feel enough, who performed strength to hide weakness, who smiled to avoid conflict, she died in the fire. But her death gave birth to your becoming. A becoming that is quiet and fierce, grounded and wild, tender and untamed. You no longer apologize for your intensity. You don't dilute your truth for comfort. You don't betray yourself for belonging. Because now you understand, authenticity is not a luxury. It is survival. To be who you truly are is the most radical act of healing in a world built on masks. And when you choose that path, when you walk the razor's edge between truth and terror, something miraculous happens. You begin to see others more clearly, not through judgment, but through compassion. Because you recognize the fear behind their cruelty. You see the shame behind their control. You sense the child behind their defense. And this seeing doesn't mean you stay in pain, but it means you stop participating in the illusion that others are your enemies. You no longer need to win battles to prove your worth. You walk away, not because you're weak, but because your peace is louder than their chaos. This is the maturity of awakening. The kind that doesn't scream for attention, but breathes in silence. The kind that doesn't need to explain its boundaries, but honors them without guilt. The kind that walks through fire again and again with open eyes and an unshakable knowing, I am still here. I'm still becoming, and no one can take that away from me. Now when the world presses in, when the noise tries to pull you back into forgetting, you remember. Not perfectly, not always instantly, but deep in your bones, you remember you are not the mask. You are not the past. You are not the pain. You are not what left you. You are what stayed. You are the silence beneath the scream. You are the space between the thoughts. You are the consciousness that watched it all burn and chose to rise anyway. This remembrance is not intellectual. It is visceral, cellular. It lives in the way you breathe deeper now, the way you rest without guilt, the way you cry without shame, the way you love without losing yourself. You've become fluent in the language of the soul. And that language does not speak in straight lines or pretty stories. It speaks in symbols, in synchronicity, in gut instincts and wild dreams. You no longer demand certainty. You dance with the unknown. You no longer worship control. You surrender to the mystery. And this mystery is not empty. It is alive. It is the space where miracles are born. And the greatest miracle of all is that you have finally come home, not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself. To the self you abandoned to survive. The self who waited patiently beneath the pain. The self who always knew the way. This is your rebirth. Not loud, not theatrical, but real, lived, felt, earned. And now no one can unmake you again. Because the final stage of awakening is not escape. It is embodiment. It is not rising above humanity. It is diving into it with your soul intact. It's not rejecting the world. It's choosing to see it through healed eyes. You no longer need to leave your body to feel divine. You no longer need to escape reality to feel peace. You are the bridge now between spirit and form, between heaven and earth. Between the old you and the becoming you. You carry both the wound and the wisdom, the fear and the fire, the chaos and the calm. And you don't need to choose one over the other anymore. You've integrated them. You've made space for the full spectrum of your humanity. And in doing so, you've become whole. That's the truth. Most don't tell you about spiritual awakening. It doesn't make you special. It makes you real. It doesn't lift you above others. It brings you into deeper connection with them. It humbles you. It breaks you open. It strips you down. And then slowly it rebuilds you with truth as your bones and love as your skin. And the love you carry now is not naive. It is forged in fire. It doesn't need to fix others. It simply sees them. And in that seeing, something sacred unfolds. You begin to live not as a performance, but as a presence. Not as a reaction, but as a response. Not as a product of your past, but as a channel for something timeless and eternal. This is survival. This is healing. This is awakening. And now you begin again, not as someone new, but as someone finally, fully, profoundly you. You begin again, not in pursuit, but in presence. Not chasing enlightenment like a trophy, but walking barefoot through your life with reverence, humility, and awe. The illusions have crumbled, and now you're left with only what is real. Your breath, your boundaries, your truth, your being. And in this quiet state of being, you realize something extraordinary, something you missed in all the striving, the fixing, the unraveling. You never needed to become someone else. You only needed to remember. Underneath all the conditioning, all the shame, all the inherited fear, you were always whole. Not flawless whole, not pure complete. The parts of you that you hated were never unlovable. They were simply unheard. And now, after all the breakdowns and breakthroughs, you listen. You don't rush to silence your sadness anymore. You sit with it. You let it speak. You don't demonize your anger. You ask what boundary was crossed. You don't hide your fear. You trace it back to the story that birthed it. This is radical self-love. Not the kind sold in affirmations and feel-good quotes. The kind that requires courage. The kind that meets your pain like an old friend and says, I see you. I'm not going anywhere. And something magical begins to happen when you love yourself like this, not with conditions, but with commitment. Your nervous system recalibrates, your relationships shift, your desires purify. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. You stop performing because you've stopped believing that love must be earned. You stop searching because you are no longer lost. And when the world tries to seduce you back into forgetfulness with its noise, its chaos, its hollow definitions of success, you don't react with panic. You pause. You return to breath. You return to presence. You return to the sacred now. Because now you understand the kingdom of heaven was never in the sky. It was always inside you, waiting for the veil to lift. And now that the veil is gone, you don't want to go back. You couldn't even if you tried, because awakening changes you at the root. You see differently, feel differently, exist differently. You don't walk through the world, your soul flows through it. You're not trying to conquer it, you're co-creating with it. You've become a tuning fork for truth, a mirror for others who are just beginning. And without needing to preach, your very presence becomes permission. Permission for others to feel, to fall, to rise, to heal, to remember. This is how the awakened ones move. Not loudly, not desperately, but like water. Soft enough to flow, strong enough to carve stone. They don't chase, they attract. They don't beg, they embody. They don't manipulate, they magnetize. Because they've learned the ultimate paradox. When you let go of needing to be seen, you become radiant. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you become undeniable. When you no longer fear your shadow, you become light. Not because you banished the darkness, but because you held it close until it transformed. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is spiritual embodiment. Jung never promised this path would be easy. He warned us it would tear us apart. But he also promised that what remains after the tearing is real. It is you, your essence, your soul stripped of the lies, your fire burning clean, your truth sharp and unshakable. And when you walk in that truth, the world begins to reflect it. You attract people who see your soul, not just your image. You build relationships that nourish, not deplete. You live a life that aligns, not just impresses. And maybe, for the first time, you feel at peace, not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. This is the final integration. Not a destination, but a return. You've gone into the underworld, you've met your demons, you've danced with your shadows, you've cried rivers over old selves, and now standing on the other side, you feel your feet grounded in something unshakable. Self, not ego self, the eternal observer, the inner divine, the indestructible core that never left even when you did. And this self is not interested in the roles you play. It doesn't care about the job title, the applause, the followers, the gold stars. It only wants one thing: for you to live as truth, for you to embody the fullness of who you are, without shame, without fear, without apology. It wants your wholeness, not your performance, your depth, not your perfection. And now you can finally offer it that. Not because you figured everything out, but because you stopped pretending you had to. You dropped the armor. You burned the scripts. You looked in the mirror and said, "I'm willing to meet myself here." And that willingness, that sacred, trembling, holy willingness, is what turns pain into purpose, chaos into clarity, darkness into light. You survived your spiritual awakening, and now you live it. Every day, every breath, every moment you choose truth over illusion, presence over distraction, love over fear. This is your path now, and it doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real. And it already is. And now that you live this truth, you begin to understand the deeper reason why you had to fall apart, why life stripped you down to nothing, why you lost people, places, and identities you once clung to like lifelines. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The old structures couldn't hold the truth of who you are becoming. The old roles couldn't carry the weight of your soul. The life you were building before, though it may have looked perfect, was too small for your awakening. You were meant to outgrow it, and that is why everything collapsed. Because your expansion demanded it. You weren't dying, you were molting. You weren't broken, you were breaking open. The universe didn't abandon you, it was calling you inward. To the sanctuary, to the silence, to the place where nothing external can touch you. And now, standing in that space, you realize the greatest gift of all: you are enough without the mask. You are whole without the performance. You are worthy, not because of what you offer others, but because of who you are in stillness, in solitude, in your own sacred skin. And with that realization, you stop trying to be understood. You stop needing to explain your journey to people who were never meant to walk it with you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop negotiating your truth for scraps of approval. Because you've seen what happens when you betray yourself, it costs more than it gives. So you don't do it anymore. You choose alignment over attachment. You choose peace over performance. You choose authenticity even when it's lonely. Because you finally know being alone and being in integrity is better than being surrounded and disconnected from yourself. And slowly, the loneliness transforms. It becomes solitude, sacred, empowering, healing. You learn to enjoy your own presence. You become your own safe place, your own guide, your own source of love. And ironically, when you no longer chase connection to fill the void, real connection finds you. Not because you need it, but because you are it. And this kind of connection isn't based on validation. It's based on resonance. Soul to soul. Real to real. The kind that doesn't demand you change. The kind that reflects back the truth you fought so hard to reclaim. So you speak differently now. You pause more often. You listen with your whole body. You trust the silence between the words. You sense things others miss, not because you're better, but because you're present, because you're attuned, because the static that once distorted your inner signal has cleared. The lies have died, the shame has dissolved, and what's left is the quiet clarity of selfhood. And that clarity is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It guides you like a compass, not a map. You no longer need all the answers. You just need the next true step, and the next, and the next. You walk in surrender now, not in defeat, but in power, because you understand that control was never the goal. Mastery was. And mastery comes not from force, but from flow. You've learned to move with life instead of against it, to dance with uncertainty instead of fearing it, to soften instead of armor up. And that softness, contrary to everything you were taught, is your strength. That sensitivity is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's what kept you alive in the fire. It's what carried you through the silence, and now it's what connects you to the divine. This is the hidden gift of surviving your spiritual awakening. You don't just change your life, you change your level of consciousness. You become a vessel for something larger than yourself. A living prayer, a walking truth. And that truth ripples, not through grand gestures, but through your presence, through the way you look someone in the eye, through the way you hold space without judgment, through the way you tell the truth even when your voice shakes. You become medicine simply by being yourself. And the world needs that. It needs you, not the version you thought you had to be, but the real you. The messy, mystical, grounded, wild, luminous you. The one who knows the dark and chooses the light anyway. The one who has touched grief and now moves with grace. The one who remembers that power is not dominance, it's authenticity. It's the courage to stand naked in your truth and say, "This is me. Not perfect, but real, and I'm not hiding anymore." So when the storm returns, and it will, you will not be shaken. You've built your foundation beneath the surface. You've planted your roots in truth, and truth does not collapse. It may bend, it may tremble, but it holds. And now you hold yourself, others. The sacred paradox of being both human and holy, both flawed and divine, both shadow and light. And in that holding, in that breath, in that stillness, you are free, truly free, and nothing can take that from you again. You are free because you no longer fear the fall. You've been shattered by truth and rebuilt by grace. You've drowned in the depths of your unconscious and risen with sacred fragments stitched into your soul. There is a quiet confidence that now walks beside you, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that listens. Not the kind that seeks to dominate, but the kind that simply knows. You don't need to convince anyone of who you are. You don't need to argue your path, justify your healing, or prove your worth. Your life is no longer a defense. It is a declaration. Your silence speaks louder than your words ever could. Your presence heals more than your explanations ever will. Because the awakened soul doesn't seek validation, it radiates authenticity. And when you live in alignment with your truth, the universe responds not with applause, but with resonance. The right people appear. The right moments unfold. Not because you manipulated reality, but because you finally matched its frequency. And yet awakening isn't a trophy you place on a shelf. It's not an endpoint. It's a cycle, a rhythm, a spiral dance between death and rebirth, light and shadow, knowing and unknowing. There will still be moments of forgetting, still storms, still seasons where the silence returns asking you to go deeper. But this time you are not afraid of the descent. You no longer see darkness as failure. You see it as invitation, a whisper from the soul saying, there is more to uncover, more to integrate, more of you to remember. You understand now that healing is not linear, that there is no final form, there is only evolution. And the more you evolve, the more you release the need to control it. You stop clinging to outcomes. You stop making your worth conditional. You start trusting the flow. And in that trust, you discover the most sacred space of all, the space where you are no longer trying to escape yourself. The space where you are finally home, even in your unknowing, especially in your unknowing. This is what Jung meant when he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You've made the darkness conscious. You've looked into the abyss and found yourself. Not the self you created to survive, but the self that was always there beneath the noise. You've reclaimed your voice, not as an echo of others, but as a vibration that begins in your bones. You've stepped out of the dream of who you should be and awakened into the truth of who you are. And in that truth, you've discovered a love that doesn't ask you to shrink, a power that doesn't ask you to dominate, a freedom that doesn't ask you to run. You've found a stillness so profound it can hold the chaos, a clarity so sharp it cuts through illusion, a presence so rooted it cannot be shaken. You are not who you were, and that is the miracle. You are not trying to return, you are learning to rise. And maybe that's what this was all for. Not to give you answers, but to dissolve the questions that kept you trapped. Not to show you the light, but to teach you how to carry it. Not to fix what was broken, but to show you there was never anything wrong with you in the first place, only layers covering the truth. And now that those layers are gone, there's nothing left to become. Only more to embody. Only more of you to live. The journey didn't lead you away from yourself, it led you back. And now, with bare feet on sacred ground, with breath that carries lifetimes, you walk forward not as the seeker, but as the found. Not as the wounded, but as the healed. Not as a persona, but as a soul, alive and awake and whole. You survived. And in surviving, you remembered. And in remembering, you became. And in becoming, you are free. And in your freedom, you awaken the world. There comes a moment when the life you've carefully built begins to fracture, not from the outside, but from within. You wake up one morning and something is off. Not wrong, not broken, just hollow. The routines that once anchored you now feel suffocating. The conversations feel rehearsed. The smiles feel like masks. You can no longer pretend, yet you don't know who you are without the act. This isn't depression. This isn't burnout. This is the soul's quiet rebellion. And what you're experiencing is the beginning of a spiritual awakening. It doesn't feel like light. It feels like hell. You start to question everything, your job, your relationships, your faith, your purpose. But the questions don't lead to answers. They lead to silence. A terrifying, echoing silence where your old self used to live. And in that silence, the illusions begin to die. The illusion that you were in control. The illusion that if you just followed the rules, you'd be safe. The illusion that who you became to survive is who you were meant to be. Carl Jung once said, "You meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it." And now, here you are, face to face with the very self you spent your life running from. The person behind the persona. The pain behind the smile. The wound behind the strength. This is not a detour. This is the path. But no one tells you how much it will hurt. Because before you awaken to your true self, you must mourn the false one. You must feel the weight of every lie you told yourself just to be loved. Every version of you that was created to keep you safe. Every mask you wore so well that you forgot you were wearing it. You realized the world rewarded your mask, not your essence. It applauded your obedience, not your authenticity. And now that you're peeling it off, it punishes your truth. People withdraw. Relationships dissolve. You start losing everything that was built on the foundation of who you no longer are. And with every loss, a deeper grief sets in, not just for the people and places you're letting go of, but for the parts of yourself that believed they were real. You want to go back. You want to unsee what you've seen, but it's too late. The curtain has been pulled back. The show is over. And now the audience is gone. This is the dark night of the soul. Not a poetic phrase, but a psychological crucifixion. You're not just watching your ego die. You're watching your meaning unravel. The things that once lit your fire now seem dim. You look at your life and feel like a stranger inside it. The food tastes the same, but you're no longer hungry. The faces are familiar, but the connection is gone. Your laughter doesn't reach your eyes anymore. And when the lights go out, you find yourself curled up in the fetal position, whispering questions into the void that used to be God. This is not weakness. This is initiation. You are being broken open not as punishment, but as preparation. Your soul is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to free you. But first it must burn everything that isn't truly yours. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He meant that the awakening process is not a spiritual high, it is a psychological death. And like all deaths, it is messy, raw, and excruciatingly human. You will weep without knowing why. You will tremble without a cause. You will ache in places no doctor can find. Because the wounds are not in your flesh. They're in your story, your identity, your belief in who you needed to be to earn love. The awakening hurts because it brings you back to every moment you abandoned yourself just to belong. Every time you smiled when you wanted to scream. Every time you stayed silent to keep the peace. Every time you swallowed your truth so others wouldn't choke on it. Those memories don't surface as thoughts. They surface as exhaustion, restlessness, anxiety, disconnection. The body remembers what the mind refused to feel. And now, in this silent space of falling apart, you begin to see what you couldn't before. That your pain has always been a signal. That your exhaustion was sacred protest. That the emptiness you feel is not a void, it's a clearing. Something within you is stirring. Something ancient. Something buried under years of performance and perfectionism. Something raw and sacred that doesn't want to be liked, it wants to be known. And to know it, you must descend. Not to rise above your humanity, but to reclaim it. You are not losing yourself. You are losing who you were never meant to be. You were taught to fear this unraveling. To medicate it, to run from it, to distract yourself until it passed. But what if you stayed? What if you let yourself fall apart completely? What if you allowed the fire to consume everything false, everything borrowed, everything conditioned? You were never meant to become someone else. You were meant to remember who you are, and remembering hurts. Because you have to first confront the forgetting. You have to face every compromise, every betrayal. Every time you dimmed your light to keep someone else comfortable. But once you do, once you dare to sit in the wreckage without reaching for the exit, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear your soul again. Not as a voice outside you, but as a pulse beneath the pain. A presence, a knowing, a wordless truth that says, this is not the end. This is the threshold. Because underneath all the chaos is you. The real you. And now, you begin. You begin to sense it before you can name it. A quiet shift, subtle but unmistakable. The numbness begins to soften. The despair doesn't vanish, but it becomes less absolute. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you catch your breath without forcing it. You sit in the same room with the same problems, but something inside you has changed. You're no longer trying to escape the pain. You're watching it, listening to it, letting it speak. And that changes everything, because the moment you stop fighting your suffering, it begins to reveal what it was hiding. You see, your suffering wasn't trying to destroy you. It was trying to get your attention. It was the soul's alarm bell sounding beneath the noise of your everyday life, screaming, "Wake up!" Look deeper. You were never meant to live like this. But waking up feels like dying when you've lived your whole life asleep. You begin to notice how much of your identity was shaped not by who you are, but by who you needed to be. The child who learned to please. The teenager who learned to hide. The adult who learned to perform. You see the threads of shame, fear, and abandonment that wove themselves into your personality. And you realize most of what you called you was just a survival strategy. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to meet the world. It's not evil, it's necessary. But over time, you forgot it was a mask. You thought it was your face. And now that it's cracking, you feel like you're losing your mind. But you're not. You're shedding your skin. You're remembering that who you really are has never needed to pretend. But it's not easy to let go. Because the persona got you love, or at least something that looked like it. It earned you approval. It kept you safe. It gave you belonging, even if it was conditional. So to take it off feels like suicide. Because a part of you will die. The part that believed love must be earned through performance. The part that measured your worth by how useful, nice, humble, selfless, or impressive you could be. The moment you stop performing, you lose the applause. But in that silence you hear something else, something deeper, something sacred, your own voice. At first it's barely a whisper. It doesn't sound confident, it doesn't have evidence, it doesn't shout. But it's true, and you can feel that. Even if the truth it tells you hurts. It tells you which people in your life were only ever in love with your mask. It tells you which dreams were inherited, not chosen. It tells you that safety and aliveness do not live in the same house. And this is the heartbreak of awakening, not just that you change, but that your change reveals what was never real. You look back at your life and see all the times you abandoned yourself to stay connected. You feel the grief of self-betrayal, and you want to scream at them, at God, at yourself. But screaming doesn't help anymore. You don't want revenge. You don't want validation. You want freedom. And freedom doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from facing it. From walking into the shadows you avoided your entire life and sitting with what you find there. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now in this deep, silent darkness you begin to see. Not just the parts of you that were wounded, but the parts of you that were buried. The wildness, the sensuality, the anger, the knowing, the hunger for truth. The divine rage that once threatened your acceptance now rising to protect your essence. This is the shadow, not just the dark, but the denied. The part of you that said no when you said yes. The part of you that saw through the lies but stayed silent. The part of you that knew what you needed but was taught it was too much. And now, in your awakening, that part is rising not to destroy you but to complete you. You're not here to be good. You're here to be whole. And wholeness requires reclaiming what you lost in the name of acceptance. Your grief is not weakness. It is a rite of passage. Every tear is a thread that sews you back together. Every breakdown is a doorway. Every crack is an opening for light to pour in, not the light of spiritual cliches or bypassing platitudes, but the light of radical self-honesty, the kind that burns. You realize now this is not a phase, this is not a detour, this is not something to fix. This is the truth waking you up, and truth doesn't always comfort. Sometimes it shatters. Sometimes it burns down everything you thought you needed so that you can finally see what you truly are. You are not here to impress the world. You are here to express your soul. You are not here to be understood by the masses. You are here to understand yourself. You are not here to be who they want. You are here to become who you already are, beneath the noise, the masks, the fear. And yes, it hurts like hell. But beneath that pain is freedom. Freedom doesn't arrive with trumpets. It comes quietly, like a breath you didn't know you were holding. And when it comes, it doesn't feel like ecstasy. It feels like space, stillness, a pause so deep it unnerves you. Because you've never lived without the noise before, without the compulsions, the distractions, the endless need to prove or fix or chase. You are no longer being dragged by the machinery of your unconscious habits. You're beginning to choose. But choice at this stage is frightening, because now you're aware that every step forward can either betray or honor your truth. And the weight of that awareness feels unbearable. There is no longer anyone to blame. No more illusions to lean on. No more pretending that your suffering is someone else's fault. Awakening strips you of excuses. It puts your soul back in your own hands. And that kind of power is terrifying. Because it demands responsibility. It demands truth. It demands a level of self-honesty so raw that even your breath feels exposed. You start to realize how often you lied subtly, unconsciously to others, but mostly to yourself. How often you said yes when your soul whispered no. How often you stayed silent just to be accepted. How often you betrayed your boundaries just to not feel alone. The awakening shows you that you were never just a victim of your life. You were also its architect, and that realization brings shame. But within that shame there is gold, because now finally you can begin again. Not as the person you thought you had to be, but as the one you truly are. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And here you are, witnessing the unconscious becoming visible. Every trigger is now a teacher. Every projection a mirror. Every emotional reaction an invitation to go deeper, not into blame, but into self-revelation. You start seeing how much of your life was a repetition of unhealed patterns. The same dynamics, just different faces. The same wound dressed in new clothes. And with each painful realization, you begin to reclaim the fragments of yourself that were scattered across time, hidden in childhood memories, past relationships, cultural conditioning, and forgotten dreams. This is the sacred work of individuation, the process Jung spoke of as the unfolding of the self. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming real. It's about reconciling the many voices within you, the loyal child, the grieving adolescent, the cynical adult, and inviting them all to the table. Not to fight, but to listen, to integrate. You realize that healing is not about cutting away your brokenness. It's about holding it, with presence, with compassion, with fierce love. And in doing so, you begin to taste a freedom that no external success could ever offer, the freedom to exist without shame. But the world doesn't celebrate this kind of freedom. It doesn't understand it. It rewards conformity, not integration. It applauds the polished mask, not the authentic mess. And so as you become more yourself, you also become more alone, not lonely. Alone, because you no longer fit the molds you used to bend yourself into. You no longer laugh at what you find empty. You no longer tolerate conversations that numb your spirit. You'd rather sit in silence than perform. And this silence becomes sacred. It's in this silence that your soul begins to speak again, not through words, but through feeling, intuition, dreams. You start noticing synchronicities, moments that seem to whisper, "You are not lost. You are being guided." You begin to trust your inner signals again. You begin to trust your body, your gut, your anger, your desire, your boundaries, all the things you once doubted now becoming the compass that leads you home. But the home you're returning to isn't a place. It's a state of being, a remembering. You are not broken. You are breaking open. And in that opening, something sacred is pouring through. Something that was never taught to you in school or church or therapy. Something primal and divine. Something that feels like God, not as an idea, but as a force that lives in you as you. Not separate, not distant, intimate, inseparable. You begin to sense that all this pain had a purpose. Not to destroy you, but to make you real. Not to punish you, but to wake you up. Not to exile you, but to return you to yourself. This is the paradox of awakening. The more you break, the more whole you become. The more you descend, the more you rise. The more you face the darkness, the more light you carry. Not as a performance, but as presence. You walk into a room now and you don't need to be liked. You just are. You speak and your words carry weight, not because they're clever, but because they come from depth. You look someone in the eyes and you're no longer looking for permission. You're offering truth. And the ones who see you, truly see you, will recognize it. Not all will stay, but the ones who do are gold. Because they're not drawn to your mask. They're drawn to your essence. And that is the kind of connection your soul has been starving for. The world may still pull at your persona. It may still reward the lie and punish the truth. But you are no longer here to survive in someone else's story. You are here to live in your own. And you don't need to rush. You don't need to arrive. You just need to be where you are, completely. Because this moment, this messy, imperfect, honest moment is the gateway to everything. And now you find yourself in unfamiliar terrain. There is no roadmap here. No clear destination, no final answer to cling to. Just you, your breath, and the unfolding mystery of your becoming. You're no longer climbing a ladder. You're walking a spiral down into your depth, then up into your light, then back down again. Every descent takes you closer to something forgotten. Every rise brings it into form. You start to see that awakening is not a one-time event. It's not a dramatic flash of enlightenment. It's 1,000 quiet deaths and rebirths. A slow, sacred peeling back of layers. You lose identities you didn't know you had. Desires you once thought defined you fall away like old leaves. Goals you once chased now seem hollow. Not because you failed, but because you've grown. And growth, you learn, is not always exciting. Sometimes it's disorienting, lonely, grief-filled, because every step toward your true self takes you further from the world that once accepted your mask. You feel like you're straddling two realities, the one you've outgrown and the one you're still learning how to live in. And in that liminal space, doubt creeps in. You ask yourself, am I making a mistake? Should I go back? Was it really that bad before? But you know the answer. Because even when the path is unclear, even when your faith wavers, your soul remembers. There's a pull inside you now, a quiet but unshakable knowing that you can never again shrink to fit a life that dishonors your truth. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And privilege doesn't mean ease. It means responsibility. It means facing the consequences of being real in a world built on pretend. It means risking misunderstanding for the sake of integrity. It means carrying your own truth like a torch, even when the darkness mocks it. And you do. Not because you're fearless, but because you've made peace with fear. You no longer wait for the fear to disappear before you act. You move with it, through it, as if it were an old companion you've finally learned to walk beside. You begin to make different choices, not out of rebellion, but out of resonance. You no longer say yes just to be agreeable. You say no because it aligns with your soul. You no longer chase relationships that drain you. You let them fall away, not with bitterness, but with reverence, for they served their purpose. They taught you where you were still willing to abandon yourself. You no longer rush to fill silence with noise. You sit in it. You listen. You feel. And in that feeling, something begins to shift. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your solitude. You begin to see that the emptiness you once feared is actually space. Space for truth. Space for healing. Space for your real life to emerge, not the one you were handed, but the one your soul came here to live. And that life is quieter than you imagined. It's not about spectacle or applause. It's not about being right or successful in the eyes of others. It's about alignment, simplicity, depth. It's about moving through the world in a way that feels like yes. Yes to this breath. Yes to this choice. Yes to this sacred moment of aliveness. You realize now that awakening was never about escaping the world. It was about returning to it with your eyes open, with your heart intact, with your spirit unchained. The pain, the loss, the grief. They were not detours. They were the fire that forged you. They burned away everything that wasn't love, everything that wasn't true, everything that wasn't you. And what's left is real, imperfect, still healing, still learning, but real. You begin to understand what Jung meant when he spoke of the self, not as a perfected being, but as the totality of who you are, the light and the shadow, the broken and the whole, the known and the unknowable. All of it, held, honored, integrated. This is not a destination. It is a homecoming, a reunion with the parts of you that were exiled, shamed, and silenced, a sacred embodiment of your full humanity. And in that fullness, you find a different kind of power. Not the power to dominate or control, but the power to be. To take up space without apology. To speak your truth without shrinking. To live without the constant need to prove that you're enough. Because now you know you are. Not because of what you do, not because of how others see you, but because you exist. Because you are breathing. Because your presence is a miracle in and of itself. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be remembered. And this remembering is the most painful, beautiful, sacred work you will ever do. It is also the most necessary. Because the world does not heal through performance. It heals through presence, through people who are awake to their own humanity. People who have faced their darkness and no longer need to project it onto others. People who carry compassion not because they were taught it, but because they became it through their own descent and resurrection. And that is who you are becoming, not a perfect person, but a whole one. There's a moment in every awakening when you realize you can never unknow what you now know. You've crossed an invisible threshold. You've touched a deeper truth, and no matter how painful, you wouldn't go back, because what's behind you was never home. It was a beautifully decorated prison, A performance you mastered so well even you believed it. But once the truth breaks in, once the soul whispers, there is more, the old world collapses. And you learn to bless its ashes. You begin to feel something you've never truly known, inner stillness. Not the absence of emotion, but the absence of conflict with yourself. You're no longer at war with your needs, no longer ashamed of your desires, no longer addicted to outside approval to feel alive. You sit with yourself and finally feel safe. Safe, not because life is predictable, but because you are no longer abandoning yourself to survive it. Jung spoke of individuation as the deepest task of the human soul, the journey of becoming your full, undivided self. And this journey does not look heroic. It often looks like falling apart, like losing everything that made sense, like saying no to what once felt like yes and not knowing what will take its place. But what you're losing is only what was false, and what you're gaining cannot be taken from you. You start to live in alignment, not out of obligation, but from inner resonance. You make decisions from your body, not your fear. You follow your intuition even when it doesn't make sense. You trust the knowing that lives in your bones. And the more you live from this place, the more you notice that the world begins to shift around you, not because it has changed, but because you are no longer in the same relationship with it. You're not chasing anymore. You're not seeking validation. You're not molding yourself to be palatable. You are showing up as you are and watching who stays, who leaves, and who rises to meet you. There is grief in this, yes, but there is also liberation. You learn that love does not require performance. You learn that truth does not require permission. You learn that belonging begins with belonging to yourself. And in that place, you stop searching for someone to rescue you. You no longer look to others to give you what you were never taught to give yourself. Presence, honesty, acceptance. You become the one you were waiting for. And it is from this wholeness, not perfection but wholeness, that you begin to live a different kind of life. You stop running. You stop proving. You stop pretending. You start breathing. You start creating not for applause but for the joy of expression. You start connecting not for safety but for truth. You start walking through your days with the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are, even when the world forgets. This is the fruit of the pain you endured, not a crown, not a platform, but presence. The ability to sit in the chaos of life and remain rooted, the capacity to feel deeply without drowning, the wisdom to act from love, even when fear screams louder, the courage to hold your truth, even when it costs you everything. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And now you understand why. Because to truly accept yourself, to embrace your light and your shadow, your brilliance and your wounds, your divinity and your humanity, requires dying to every version of you that was built to be loved for something other than the truth. But on the other side of that death is something immortal, your essence, your aliveness, your soul. And it's not something you find, it's something you remember. And in that remembering, life itself begins to change. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. You begin to see beauty in places you used to overlook. Silence becomes sacred. Slowness becomes power. Stillness becomes home. You don't need the next moment to be different than this one, because this one is enough. Not because it's perfect, but because you're here. And being here fully, truthfully, unapologetically is the most radical act of all. You look back at the journey, the fire, the falling apart, the hollow nights, the soul-shaking grief, and you no longer curse it. You bow to it because it gave you back to yourself. The world may never understand what you've been through. It may never validate your transformation. It may still try to pull you back into the old roles, the old systems, the old ways. But you know. You know what it cost you to awaken. You know what it took to stay. You know who you are now. And from this place you begin to serve not from duty, not from guilt, not from ego, but from overflow, from embodiment, from love. Because when you become who you truly are, you give others permission to do the same. Not with words, but with presence. And that presence is more healing than any doctrine, more powerful than any ideology. It's truth made flesh. It's spirit made visible. It's the divine remembered through you. And now, you arrive at the quietest part of your becoming. There are no fireworks here. No applause. No thunder of revelation, only the steady rhythm of your breath, the grounded weight of your presence, and the soft echo of your soul whispering you made it through. Not to a final destination, not to some transcendent peak of enlightenment, but to the center of yourself. To the still, sacred space you once thought you had to earn, only to discover it was yours all along. You no longer seek to rise above your humanity. You have found the divine within it. In your tears, in your longing, in your anger, in your joy, in the trembling, beautiful complexity of being human. You've stopped measuring your progress by how happy you feel. You've stopped chasing peace as a product of perfection. You understand now that peace is not the absence of struggle. It's the presence of wholeness. You can be afraid and still move forward. You can be uncertain and still trust yourself. You can be hurting and still be held by something eternal. Carl Jung taught that the self, the totality of who you are, is not an ideal to strive for. It is a remembering of what has always been. And now you are no longer becoming someone. You are unbecoming everything that was never truly you. And from this place, something extraordinary begins to happen. You begin to live your life not from trauma, not from programming, not from the shoulds and expectations of others, but from truth, from presence, from your own sacred alignment. You choose differently now, not because you're trying to be better, but because you're no longer willing to betray yourself. You speak differently, not to be understood, but to be honest. You walk differently, not to impress, but because every step is yours. You are not waiting anymore, not for permission, not for signs. Not for someone else to love you into wholeness. You are walking as love, as awareness, as embodiment. You are no longer seeking the light. You are the light, and you carry it not to shine above others, but to illuminate what's real within you and around you. You begin to meet others from a place you've never touched before, not from need, not from fear, but from truth. And those who meet you there, you recognize them without needing a name, because their presence feels like home. And those who cannot meet you there, you release them, not with resentment, but with reverence. Not because you're superior, but because your soul can no longer dim to stay close. You learn that love is not clinging. Love is freedom. Love is truth. Love is being fully seen and still remaining. And if love costs you your truth, it was never love to begin with. You no longer bend to fit. You no longer twist to please. You no longer chase to be chosen, because you are already chosen by existence itself. And now you choose you. You walk forward not because the path is clear, but because your spirit is ready. You know that life will continue to rise and fall. You will still have doubts. You will still be hurt. But you are no longer afraid of the fall, because you trust your wings. Because you know that no matter how far you descend, there is always something within you that will rise again. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer hiding. You are no longer pretending. You are here, awake, alive, real. This is what it means to be reborn, not into a perfect life, but into an honest one. Not into a role, but into your soul. Not into certainty, but into presence. You have walked through fire. You have touched the void. You have lost everything false and found something truer than words. You have become the one who does not flinch at truth, who does not run from the dark, who does not sell their soul for approval. You are no longer searching for meaning. You are the meaning. And now you return to the world, not above it, not beyond it, but rooted in it, embodied, grounded, real. You will still face the noise, the chaos, the pull to forget. But now there is a flame inside you that will not go out, a voice that will not be silenced, a presence that will not be denied. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a new kind of life, a soul-led life, a life born from the ashes of your false self, a life lit by the truth you fought so hard to find. And you will walk it with grace, with courage, with love, with truth. Because now you know, you were never broken, you were breaking open. You were never lost. You were being led. You were never meant to become someone else. You were always meant to come home.
Jung once said that what is repressed in the unconscious does not simply disappear, it waits. It gathers, and eventually, it returns. The hidden revenge of empaths who refuse to be used is not cruelty, nor vengeance in the usual sense. It is the silent power of withdrawal, the force of becoming untouchable when every last thread of exploitation has been cut. This, Jung discovered, is not just a personal defense mechanism, it is the psyche's own rebellion, the unconscious demanding balance after years of being drained. And when it happens, it is as if a dormant storm finally awakens. Today, I'll take you inside that storm, into the shadowed realm where empaths, often praised for their endless giving, confront the terrifying moment when their soul whispers enough. What begins as exhaustion becomes something more, an alchemical transformation that Jung would call individuation, but which feels, in lived reality, like revenge against the very structures and people that once used their light. Imagine an empath, gentle and selfless, always the healer in their family, always the one to forgive the unforgivable. Jung observed in his patients that the psyche can endure only so much repression of rage, so much denial of its own instincts, before something snaps. That snap is rarely explosive. It is quieter, colder, more devastating. The empath disappears. They refuse to play the role anymore, and to the abuser, this sudden absence feels like annihilation. It is the revenge of silence, of detachment, of refusing to be consumed any longer. You may have felt this. Perhaps you tolerated betrayal, manipulation, or exploitation for years. You gave chances. You rationalized. You told yourself that patience was love, that endurance was virtue. But deep within, your unconscious was keeping score. Jung called this the shadow, all the disowned feelings you tried to suppress. And when the shadow bursts through, it does not ask for permission. It reclaims its voice, its anger, its boundaries. What once seemed like weakness becomes a fortress. What once felt like endless compassion becomes a sharpened clarity. I will not be used. Consider the story of a woman Jung treated, though details shift in translation. The essence remains. She was the caregiver of her entire household, the vessel of sympathy for her husband's indifference and her children's demands. For years, she was admired for her resilience, her capacity to endure. But in her dreams, violent images appeared, storms tearing through houses, wolves circling outside, her hands stained with fire. Jung knew these were not random. They were messages from her unconscious, demanding recognition of her buried rage. And when she finally stopped serving, when she walked away, the family was left shattered. To them, it felt like betrayal. To her, it was salvation. The unconscious had demanded balance, and she had answered. If you look closely at your own life, you will see where this energy gathers. The late-night resentment, the silent fantasies of escape, the secret wish that someone, anyone, would finally notice your pain. Jung believed these were not weaknesses to suppress, but signals pointing toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. And for the empath, individuation often requires refusing to be the sacrifice any longer. It is not about punishing others. It is about rescuing yourself. But make no mistake, to those who depended on your endless giving, your transformation feels like revenge. They do not see your exhaustion, your breakdowns, your tears. They only see the sudden absence of their supply, and they call it betrayal. They call it selfishness. They call it cruel. Yet in truth, it is justice. The psyche restores balance by demanding that what was taken without respect must no longer be given. Picture this as an alchemical process. The empath's suffering is the blackened stage, the nigredo, when all light seems extinguished. But within that darkness, transformation brews. The fire of resentment, the weight of silence, the dream of escape, all are ingredients in the crucible of the soul. And when the moment comes, When the empath withdraws and reclaims their life, it is the gold that emerges. Individuation, selfhood, the courage to exist without being consumed. And so the hidden revenge of the empath is not in striking back. It is in no longer being available to strike. It is the mirror they hold up to the exploiter, who suddenly sees their own emptiness reflected back. Jung warned that such confrontations with the shadow are terrifying not because of what we do to others, but because of what we finally acknowledge in ourselves. The empath, once terrified of being selfish, discovers that boundaries are sacred, that saying no is a form of divine justice. And once discovered, this cannot be undone. So ask yourself, where are you still being used? Where do you still silence your inner voice in the name of harmony? Where does your own shadow wait, pressing at the edges of your dreams? The answer is not in revenge as the world defines it, but in the deeper revenge of becoming whole. For when you refuse to be consumed, you no longer participate in the cycle of exploitation. And that withdrawal, silent, sovereign, absolute, is the most devastating act of all. There is a silence more powerful than any scream. Jung noticed that when the empath finally withdraws, when they refuse to keep offering their soul as nourishment, the silence they leave behind becomes deafening to those who fed on them. And yet, for the empath, this silence is not empty, it is fertile. It is the ground where the true self begins to rise, no longer shackled by the endless obligation to heal others at the cost of one's own life. In Jung's writings, he described the archetype of the wounded healer. The empath embodies this, carrying pain from their earliest years, often molded in families where love was conditional, where harmony depended on absorbing the chaos of others. As children, many empaths became what Jung would call the parentified child, stepping into roles that were never theirs to carry. They learned early that safety came not from expressing their own needs, but from anticipating the needs of others. This is the seed of their gift and also their curse. Think of it like this. An empath's sensitivity is like a mirror made of water. Every ripple of emotion around them disturbs their own surface. They feel the anger unspoken, the grief hidden behind smiles, the hunger for attention that others conceal. And for years, they reflect it, absorb it, transmute it. But in Jung's framework, this constant outward orientation is incomplete. The unconscious begins to rebel, whispering through symptoms fatigue, anxiety, inexplicable resentment, dreams of drowning or being chased. These are the psyche's alarms, warning that too much of the self has been abandoned. Let me take you deeper into a story, one drawn from Jung's clinic, and one that mirrors countless modern lives. A man, gentle by nature, came to Jung with chronic exhaustion. He was praised by colleagues as the one who always stayed late, who took burdens no one else wanted. His family leaned on him for everything, though he confessed quietly that he felt invisible. His dreams revealed a striking pattern in one. He was carrying a massive cross through a city while people cheered. But when he collapsed, they stepped over him as if he were nothing. Jung saw immediately that this was the myth of the sacrifice the Christ archetype distorted. The man had become a martyr to everyone's needs. Yet his unconscious was screaming rebellion. In the weeks that followed, he began to refuse certain requests. The moment he did, the world around him erupted with accusations he was selfish, changed, cold. But Jung understood this was not cruelty. This was individuation. The man was reclaiming the self that had been crucified under duty. If you are an empath, you know this crucible. You know the quiet despair of realizing your kindness has become currency, spent without gratitude. You know the ache of being surrounded by people yet feeling unseen. And you know, perhaps in secret, the longing to disappear, to walk away and never return. Jung would not call this madness. He would call it the shadow of your unlived life demanding recognition. For every time you said yes against your soul, a fragment of yourself slipped into the unconscious, waiting to be retrieved. The revenge is not against others, it is against the lie that your life must be sacrificed to prove your worth. This is the paradox. The empath's deepest fear is being abandoned. Yet the way they heal is by daring to abandon the roles that consumed them, to stand alone, to confront the void. Jung described individuation as a descent into the abyss of the unconscious, a confrontation with death itself, yet always, hidden in the abyss, is the seed of new life. When you, as an empath, withdraw from being used, you are enacting this myth. You are not simply protecting yourself, you are stepping into the archetypal journey of death and rebirth. You die to the false self, the persona of the eternal giver, and you are reborn as the sovereign soul. But the cost is real. Jung warned that every transformation requires sacrifice. When the empath withdraws, they often lose relationships that once defined their lives. Friends may vanish, family may turn cold, lovers may lash out. To those who fed on your giving, your absence feels like betrayal, and so the empath must face the crucifixion of their old identity. This is why Jung insisted that individuation is not comfortable, it is tragic, but it is also liberating. For in losing what was false, you gain what is real. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: you are standing at the edge of a vast mirror. You lean forward, and instead of your familiar reflection, you see every face you have ever served. Parents, partners, friends, strangers, all looking back, demanding, then slowly, one by one, they fade, until only you remain, not the persona, not the healer, not the savior, just you, raw, uncertain, but free. This is the moment of transformation Jung spoke of, when the self, long buried, finally stands unveiled. And here lies the hidden revenge. For those who once exploited you, your withdrawal exposes their dependency. They must now face their own shadows, their own emptiness, their own lack of wholeness. The empath, in refusing to be used, forces the exploiter into confrontation with themselves. And though this may look like punishment, it is something far more profound. It is the unconscious balancing the scales of justice. So the journey continues. The empath's silence is not an ending, it is a threshold. It is the beginning of a life no longer defined by being drained. It is the first breath of sovereignty. Jung's discovery was that such thresholds are the essence of individuation. You are not meant to be endlessly selfless. You are meant to become whole, and wholeness requires shadow, fire, and the courage to walk away. Jung believed that the psyche speaks in symbols because words alone are too fragile to carry the weight of truth. And so, when the empath begins to awaken, the unconscious often delivers images both haunting and profound: locked doors, empty wells, wild animals stalking in the night. These are not random, they are maps. They tell you that the doors you once left open for others must now be shut, that the well of your giving has run dry, that the predator you feared in others is now rising within you as your own instinct for survival. One patient of Jung's dreamt repeatedly of a house she was tending. The house was full of visitors, demanding, restless, endlessly spilling wine and tearing furniture. In her dream, she scrubbed floors, cleaned dishes, smiled through exhaustion. But one night, the dream shifted. She stood outside, and the house burned to the ground. At first, she panicked, horrified at the destruction. Yet, as the smoke cleared, she noticed a garden blooming where the ashes lay. Jung explained that this dream revealed the psyche's rebellion against her role as caretaker. The burning of the house was not tragedy, it was liberation. The hidden revenge of the empath was not the fire itself, but the freedom it made possible. For you, too, the dreams arrive. Perhaps you have visions of losing everything, of falling into water, of standing at a crossroads. These images can terrify because they echo what Jung called the death of the old self. Yet within each symbol lies a secret. What feels like death is the beginning of individuation. To walk away, to refuse to be used, is to allow something larger to emerge. But here is where the paradox deepens. The empath's withdrawal does not always appear dramatic to the outside world. Sometimes it is subtle, a conversation where you finally say, "No, I can't do this for you anymore." A family gathering where you no longer absorb the tension, but let it hang in the air. A relationship where your silence no longer rushes to smooth over conflict. These moments are small on the surface, but to those around you, they feel seismic. The energy they once took without resistance is no longer there. It is like trying to drink from a well that has gone dry. They call this betrayal, but Jung would call it balance restored. This balance is the justice of the unconscious. The empath does not seek revenge, they seek survival. And yet, the consequence for others is unavoidable. They must now face themselves. Without your constant buffering, their anger has no place to land but back in their own hands. Without your endless forgiveness, their guilt rises to the surface. Without your availability, their emptiness becomes unbearable. This is why the empath's refusal to be used feels so devastating to others. It forces the unconscious material of the exploiter to emerge. And this, Jung would insist, is why individuation is not only personal, it is collective. When you, as an empath, refuse to be consumed, you are not only liberating yourself, you are forcing a ripple effect in the entire system around you. Families restructure, friendships dissolve or transform, workplaces shift. Every time you break the cycle of being used, you shine a light into the collective shadow. And though it may not feel like it in the moment, your courage becomes a kind of medicine. Still, the journey is not without cost. Many empaths who walk this path experience profound loneliness at first. To withdraw is to lose familiar roles, identities, even relationships. The silence of freedom can feel like exile. Jung warned that every individuation carries a period of isolation, when the old world no longer fits and the new world has not yet appeared. In myth, this is the hero wandering the desert, the initiate lost in the labyrinth, the alchemist locked in the sealed vessel of transformation. The temptation in this stage is to return, to re-enter the old cycle for comfort. But the unconscious does not allow backward steps. The door once shut cannot be reopened. It is here that the empath discovers the self, the archetype at the center of Jung's psychology. The self is not the persona, not the mask you wear to please others. It is not the shadow alone, nor the wounds of childhood. It is the wholeness that contains all opposites, compassion and rage, giving and withholding, love and boundary. The hidden revenge of the empath is that by refusing to be consumed, they become whole, and wholeness cannot be manipulated. Picture yourself standing in front of a mirror again, but this time, when you look, you do not see the reflection of all those you served. You see your own face lit by fire and shadow both, and behind you, no longer a house filled with others, but a vast open field. It is terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. This is sovereignty. This is individuation. And so the empath's revenge is never loud. It is never vindictive. It is the quiet and irreversible declaration, I will not be used. This declaration changes everything. It cuts ties not with cruelty, but with clarity. It reclaims time, energy, and identity. And it awakens a power that no manipulator can touch, the power of a self that has finally chosen to live. Jung would tell us that to refuse to be used is not selfishness. It is alignment with the deepest law of the psyche that life must grow toward wholeness. And when you step into this truth, you not only save yourself, you become an invitation for others to face their own shadows. There comes a moment in every empath's life when the silence inside them becomes louder than the noise around them. Jung would have called this the turning point of individuation, when the unconscious demands not only recognition, but action. The empath can no longer pretend. The mask of endless patience cracks. The persona of selflessness dissolves. And in that rupture, a new figure rises, the sovereign self, fierce in its clarity. This is the hidden revenge of the empath, not retaliation, not cruelty, but sovereignty. A sovereignty that unsettles those who once depended on their compliance. Imagine a fortress, once with gates wide open, welcoming all who entered. Over time, the fortress was plundered, its resources drained, its walls eroded by constant invasion. But one day, without warning, the gates close. The walls are rebuilt with stone and fire, and those who once walked freely inside are left outside, pounding at doors that no longer yield. To them, this feels like betrayal, but to the fortress, it is survival. Jung encountered this fortress building again and again in his work. He wrote that the psyche, when it has been wounded too deeply by exploitation, naturally seeks protection in symbols of boundaries, dreams of walls, locked chests, mountains, and caves. One patient dreamt of building a tower on an island, unreachable by bridges. Jung recognized this as a symbol of individuation, the psyche reclaiming its sacred space after years of invasion. For the empath, such dreams are not fantasies, they are blueprints for the soul's rebirth. But here lies a deeper truth. The empath's withdrawal does more than protect, it transforms. In Jung's language, this is the alchemical stage of albedo, the whitening, where after the blackened chaos of suffering, a new clarity dawns. When the empath refuses to be used, they discover a startling gift: their sensitivity, once a curse, becomes a compass. No longer hijacked by others' needs, it turns inward, guiding them toward their own depths. They begin to hear the subtle voice of the self, the voice that whispers, "You are not here to be consumed. You are here to become whole." And yet, this rebirth does not come without shadows. Jung warned that every individuation must pass through confrontation with the unconscious, where old wounds and suppressed rage rise to the surface. For the empath, this often feels like a flood of anger they never allowed themselves to feel. They may dream of violence, of storms, of fire. These are not signs of corruption, but of healing. The shadow, once denied, is now embraced. And in this embrace, power returns. I recall Jung's account of a woman who dreamt of stabbing an intruder in her home. She awoke horrified, believing herself monstrous. But Jung reassured her the dream was not about murder, it was about reclaiming agency. The intruder symbolized the people who drained her. The act of violence symbolized her unconscious, declaring, "You have the right to defend yourself." For empaths, these dreams are common, and they are crucial. They mark the moment when the soul begins to insist on boundaries, not as cruelty, but as necessity. To live without being used is to enter what Jung called the middle passage of life. Here, the empath must confront loneliness, guilt, and the temptation to return to old roles. Families will protest, friends will withdraw, manipulators will rage. But the empath's hidden revenge is their refusal to bend. their silence, their absence, their unavailability, all of it forces others to meet themselves. And though painful, this is how transformation ripples outward. Now imagine yourself in this passage. You are walking through a dark forest at night. Behind you, voices call familiar, demanding, pleading. Ahead, only silence. You hesitate, heart pounding, tempted to turn back. But then you notice a faint light ahead, flickering like a lantern. That light is yourself. And though the journey is lonely, every step you take toward it is a step away from being used. The empath's revenge, then, is not in destroying others, it is in refusing to destroy themselves for others. It is a refusal so profound that it reshapes destinies. Jung would say that in this moment, the empath steps into their archetypal role not as healer, but as sovereign. The healer serves, the sovereign chooses. The healer absorbs, the sovereign protects. The healer bends, the sovereign stands. And when the empath becomes sovereign, no manipulator can hold power over them again. But the cost must always be acknowledged. Jung never romanticized individuation. He knew it was a path of fire and sacrifice. For the empath, the cost is often the shattering of old identities. No longer the good child, the perfect partner, the loyal friend. Those masks crumble. And with them, illusions die. To the world, the empath may now appear distant, cold, even ruthless. But within, something greater takes root: authenticity. And authenticity, Jung believed, is the rarest and most dangerous gift a human being can embody. You may feel the echoes of this within you now. The guilt of stepping back, the anger of years wasted, the loneliness of no longer belonging to the roles that once defined you. And yet, beneath it all, a quiet strength stirs. A whisper: I am still here, and I am mine. This is the self announcing itself. This is the soul's declaration of sovereignty. So the empath's hidden revenge is not vengeance at all. It is resurrection. It is the silent fire of becoming untouchable, unmanipulable, unbroken. It is the moment when you, who once gave without end, finally give to yourself. Jung taught that every true transformation ends not with destruction, but with integration. The empath's hidden revenge, then, is not simply leaving behind those who used them. It is something greater, reclaiming all the pieces of themselves they once abandoned. It is gathering the fragments of the shadow, the silenced voice, the buried anger, the forgotten joy, and weaving them back into a soul that no longer leaks its power away. This is the final movement of individuation, the moment when the empath no longer defines themselves by wounds, roles, or betrayals, but by wholeness. Jung compared it to alchemy's last stage, the rubedo, when the gold finally emerges from the furnace. The empath who once feared boundaries now wields them as sacred. The empath who once drowned in others' emotions now sails upon them with mastery. The empath who once vanished in self-sacrifice now stands radiant, not in service of exploitation, but in service of the self. But this rebirth is not abstract. It is lived in the smallest details of life. It is in the quiet, no spoken without explanation. It is in the decision to rest rather than rescue. It is in the courage to love without losing oneself. Jung believed the self is not an ideal we strive toward, it is the reality we uncover when the masks fall. And for the empath, the greatest revenge is finally living from that reality. Let me tell you of one last case, one that captures the full circle of this journey. A man came to Jung after decades of servitude to his family, his workplace, his community. He was praised as saintly, yet inside he felt hollow. His dreams told the truth, images of skeletons carrying burdens, of his heart locked in chains, of a child crying behind a closed door. Jung guided him to see that the child was himself, abandoned so that others could thrive. Slowly, painfully, he began to change. He stopped overgiving. He distanced himself from those who drained him. At first, the backlash was fierce accusations, isolation, even hatred. But then, something shifted. In his dreams, the child reappeared, this time laughing, this time free. The man described waking with tears, realizing that for the first time in his life, he belonged to himself. This, Jung said, was individuation fulfilled. And here lies the truth for you, too. The revenge of the empath is not against others. It is against the lie that love must mean sacrifice, that compassion must mean exploitation, that to be good you must be consumed. The revenge is simply this: to live, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. To those who once drained you, this feels like abandonment. But in reality, it is an initiation. It forces them to confront their own shadows, their own emptiness, their own need for growth. Whether they accept that initiation is their choice, but your task is complete. You have broken the cycle. You have become sovereign. Now imagine yourself standing in the center of a vast circle of mirrors. Each mirror reflects not the faces of those who once used you, but versions of yourself: child, healer, warrior, sovereign. You step forward, and one by one, the mirrors merge, until only one remains, the whole self, radiant, complete. This is you, not the fragments, not the roles, not the wounds. You, and no one can use you again, because you belong fully to yourself. This is why Jung's discoveries remain dangerous even today, because they free us from the chains of unconscious repetition. They show us that love without boundaries is not love, that healing without self-care is poison, that compassion without sovereignty is exploitation. When the empath refuses to be used, they do not only liberate themselves, they liberate generations to come. Children witness it, communities feel it. The collective unconscious shifts. And so the hidden revenge of the empath is not only silence, not only absence, not only sovereignty, it is legacy. It is the knowledge that by refusing to be consumed, you have opened a path where wholeness is possible for yourself and for all who follow. If you recognize yourself in this journey, comment, "I reclaim my sovereignty." Your healing is not only your liberation, but a torch for humanity's awakening. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.